The first time I saw the Camas lily was during my second trip to Ketchum in early 2019. And my impression of it was just stunning. The prairie itself was like nothing I've ever seen before. So much nature, so many birds. I believe it's a bird sanctuary too. I spent a day there, just looking and just experiencing it all, absorbing the whole atmosphere, and picked a few flowers and pulled a few bulbs, which looked like onion at the time. I brought the bulb back to my hotel, and I put them in drinking glasses and just stare at them for a long time, actually. Taking pictures of them, looking at them and all the details. I particularly paid attention to the bulb because I know that the bulb is a significant part of the plant, which ordinarily when you go to the prairie you don't see them unless you pull them out of the ground. And the story is that the bulb is a significant part of the Native American diet during the early 1900s. Because the Native Americans actually were the first people to settle on this land, and this is a very important part of their food source. So I was thinking then that if I'm going to make a big sculpture, it will have to be, well, let's say that the bulb will have to play a significant part in it. I took a few of the flowers with me to New York, and I made some doodle, but I spent most of the time just looking and sort of paying attention to how different aspects of it could potentially be in my drawing or in my concept. So when I came back to Cambodia, I started to make more serious studies from the pictures and from my drawings. And to communicate to my staff, I needed to get the basic idea down, the important parts that I want in the sculpture. Of course, every time I make a sculpture based on something that is natural, you never know what's going to show up or what's going to end up being the sculpture itself. But I needed to do just as much study about it as possible. I call that procrastination. But I also started making these studies in plasticine, which is like a clay, but an artificial clay. And from these, my staff gets these pieces, and then they do the individual forms out of them. In the meantime, I was also making woodblock prints, and I thought that if I spend a bit more time looking and seeing the shape closely, that will better inform me when it comes to actually making the three-dimensional form. So I made 2 of them, and this is the process, as you can see here. And the woodblock I made very basic, because I don't have a press, so everything is hand done, and I kind of employ I use the Japanese rollers and brayers and water base, and then later on I use oil ink as well. And then to prepare for the actual sculpture itself, we go to the depot, which is just a few minutes down the river from here. And this is where we've been buying our bamboo, and when we need a lot of bamboo, we buy it from this depot, which comes from northern Cambodia. It floats down the Mekong River, and we spend a few hours choosing bamboo about once every 6 months or so. And we come back and prepare the bamboo. This process we've been doing this since we started making sculpture with bamboo. Everything by hand, you split by hand, you cut by hand, you boil it in this custom-made tank that we built a long time ago, about 12, 13 years ago. And for bamboo, we just use water, and we boil it for about 2 hours. Now, the reason for boiling bamboo is because there's insects that have laid egg inside the bamboo, and you have to boil it for that long in order to make sure that all the eggs are dead, and then the bamboo don't get eaten from the inside after the sculpture is made. So this is quite a laborious process that most people don't know that we practice, but this is what we do. And then on to preparing the shapes. So it's basically planning out, like any other sculpture I make. We plan out the best procedure, the best way to do it. So these are just pieces, part of the flower. Now for this sculpture, for the first time, we are using predominantly metal in order for the sculpture to stand up and withstand the weather and however many months or years that the sculpture is going to stand up. So the metal is just basic metal rods that we get from a shop, and then. But what we do is when we have to forge it, we don't use just straight up metal from the factory. We actually forge it so that it looks a little bit more organic, and we just hammer it with a big hammer, and we put it through a small custom-made furnace that we built that is powered by gas. And then the next step is start building. So sketch it out, the shape on the floor or on a piece of paper, and then we're just trying to do the best we can to make it as we go along, trying to see how the sculpture looks. And then, so some guys are making let's say the stock part of the sculpture, and then some guys are making the flower parts. So using those studies that I make in plasticine, I assign them to different people to do them. And so I think we have about 6 or 7 people working on this project altogether. So once I feel like we have enough of these flower parts, we start to construct them. And normally I discuss it with my senior assistant, who's been with me for over 15 years. And once we agreed that this is the way, or that's the way we should go about and do it, we just start. And then everyone is involved in terms of doing different parts of the sculpture. So it's an all kind of teamwork, because the thing about making a sculpture like this is you don't know how it's going to turn out. So you want to put all the energy of the staff into making it together to a certain point that we are somehow comfortable with the overall shape, and then we can sort of relax a little bit. But the first couple of months was quite intense. We use, as I was saying, that the bulb should be a significant part of the sculpture. We've been using, and I've been collecting these pots and pans. They're used, frying pan, buckets, kettles. That we buy them from the recycling, sort of the recycling depots, as you might call them. And obviously they're very cheap, and this is just before they get shipped to either Vietnam or Thailand. And so we go around and just buy as much as we can, and then flatten them out, hammering it, and it has all these beautiful characteristics that you wouldn't get if you buy a new one. So, and I thought that, because it's used and it's different colors, there's a lot of ash and a lot of dirt and stuff like that on there. And, we clean it up a little bit, but we pretty much kind of leave it so that it shows the history that is being used. And that's an important aspect of my work, is when I use other people's used stuff, I want the history to be there still. So the bulb here is done, and now it's about how is the sculpture is going to stand up, and then, what is it going to look like, how is it going to lean, how is it going to balance. So all those things come into the picture now, and we just put on the scaffolding, and then we get the right angle. And this one we took outside of the studio in the front in order to study how the position of the bulb in relation to the flower is going to be. So I just stand around and just kind of stare at it, and then the guys will adjust, and then we'll mark it down, and then we connect them together back when they're on the ground. And finally the sculpture is done. And when the sculpture is done, I like it to stand up without having anything to hold it up. That's ideally the case, and it should be. The other stuff that you anchor to the floor is just to hold it so that if someone knock it over or the wind knock it over, it won't go over. But if you display my sculpture indoor, you probably don't need any anchor. So that's part of the idea of how making everything stand up and position right. I've made quite a few big flower sculpture in the past. The first one I made was called Morning Glory, which somehow the Guggenheim collected. Making a big sculpture of plants and of seeds and of flowers, it is just something that become part of what I do and what I've done during the last 10 years or so. And sometimes I make a joke like I should be making like one flower a year, because it's sort of the sculpture that brings the team together, and it's sort of the sculpture that the Cambodian people will come and they never ask like, what is this? So I kind of like that idea that I'm making something that other people can relate to without coming with the art knowledge, And so the opportunity to make this Camas flower, knowing that the significance of the bulb is an important part of a culture, was something that I was excited to do, because it can't just be random either. You have to have a relationship to it somehow. That plant has to have more than just that it looks pretty, or that it touch on so many levels. So, for example, like my Morning Glory is referencing my childhood, during the Khmer Rouge, and how that plant was very important to the livelihood of people all over Cambodia. And then another sculpture is called a Rang Phnom flower, which is the cannonball tree flower, which is a flower that has some significance to Buddhism. So any chance I get to learn about another culture or significance about this plant for a certain kind of people or a certain kind of place, I like to explore that. So yeah, it was an honor to be able to make this work, and hopefully other people will find some beauty in it and some significance to it that they haven't thought of before.